I see a couple of empty chairs, but let's get started because I got fish eyes, Major League last week when we went over, so I don't want that to happen again. Any public speakers this morning? Okay. Can I have a motion and then we'll vote to approve the minutes?
Motion made.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The minutes pass. Any changes to the work plan this month? Hearing none. I'm assuming there are no changes to the work plan. Let's move into the operations report.
Good morning, everyone. Weekday on-time performance results for March 2010 are as follows. Absolute on-time performance was 70.1% system-wide, down 5.8% from 74.4% in 2009. The A division was at 65.2%, while the B division was at 73.6%. Controllable on-time performance was 92.8% system-wide, up 8.4% from 85.6% in 2009. The A division was at 94.6%, while the B division was at 91.6%. There were 52,840 weekday delays in March. Moving to weekends, on-time performance results for March were as follows. Absolute on-time performance was 41.4% system-wide, down 19.8% from 51.7% in February. Controllable on-time performance was 89.9% system-wide, up 1.1% from 88.9% in February. Positive results in subway weight assessment continued in March. System-wide weight assessment was 90.6 in March, up 2% from last year. Both the A and B divisions showed increases. For the 12-month average, weight assessment was 89.4 system-wide, an improvement of 2.5% from a year ago. Again, performance increased for both the A and B divisions. The upward trend also continued for subway mean distance between failure, which was 213,410 miles in March, an increase of 42.2% from 150,126 last year. The 12-month average MDBF now stands at 165,396 miles, up 23.7% from 133,711 a year ago. That concludes the subway report.
The subway customer accident rate decreased by 3.9% in February, and the 12-month average also decreased slightly by 1.5% compared to a year ago. The employee lost time accident rate was down 30% in March. However, the 12-month average rate shows an increase of 6.4% compared to the previous year. The number of confirmed fires remained unchanged from the previous year at 98. Also, in March, all fires except one were categorized as being low or average in severity. Over the last 12 months, fires were down 9.2%.
The one fire that was not classified as low or average, what were the circumstances on that, Cheryl?
That was a fire at a circuit breaker house at Pitkin Yard, and it was a cable that went to ground between Circuit Breaker House 1 and the yard tracks. So it was in the yard. No effect to service. Yes.
What could possibly have taken place on the number 6 line where it was only on time 0.9%?
Is that the absolute on-time performance? Number 6 line, probably we had some station passes, right, for general orders. Peter?
Right. As we'll talk about in a few minutes, the absolute on-time performance, basically, if a station is closed for reconstruction, then everything is counted as late.
Right.
In the 6, we have stations in both directions that are closed. So basically, with the exception of a few trains that short turn at 138th Street, everything is late.
So it's similar to the Brighton line problem.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
When we have a presentation we want to give you on changing the performance indicators, because that's the rhetorical question everybody asks. Well, that's what we're proposing to do here, because it's kind of a meaningless statistic, unfortunately. So we're a little late. Pun intended.
Yes, good morning. Crime-wise, as far as crime, we're even from same numbers as we had last year, 795 versus 7095. We're averaging 5.56 crimes a day, as much as we did last year. Again, it's a very low number. We'd like to get under, and which we're going to attempt to do. And if there's
any questions? Finance, preliminary March fare box revenue was $292.5 million, or $9.3 million above budget, due in part to higher subway ridership. $3.6 million of the overrun was due to replacing January and February estimated average pass fares with the actual first quarter fares. Year-to-date fare box revenue was at $786.2 million, or $1.8 million above the budget. The average non-student fare in March 2010 was $1.49. In constant 1996 dollars, the average fare fell from $1.38 in 1996 to $1.03 in 2010. Operating expenses before depreciation were under budget by $24.5 million for the month and $47.2 million year to date. So the actions we're taking to try to control costs are having their effect, mostly due to lower energy and fringe benefit expenses and the favorable timing of expenses and vacancies. Ridership. March 2010 ridership totaled 206.2 million, or 1.8% above budget, due to increased subway ridership. Year-to-date ridership was 555.2 million, 0.4% below budget. Average weekday subway ridership in March was 5.2 million, an increase of 1% from 2009. Average weekday local bus ridership in March was 2.3 million, a decrease of 3.1% from 2009. Partially due to differences in the school calendar. Average weekday express bus ridership was 45,000, a decrease of almost 2%. March 2010 average weekday paratransit ridership was 30,000, an increase of 11.8% from 2009. Preliminary April 2010 financial results. Preliminary April total fare box revenue of $279.7 million exceeded budget by $5.8 million due to higher than budgeted ridership. And preliminary April operating expenses were under budget by $24.3 million, including underruns and the favorable timing of expenses in both labor and non-labor expenses. Any questions on the finances? Capital program, Fred Smith.
Capital program for March, we had a total of $54 million in awards. That brings us to $77.5 million year to date. On the completion side, about $129.6 million worth of completions, and that continues to be dominated by the acceptance of the R160 rail cars. Commissioner Frasca, you had asked last month on the status of the schedule. We are on schedule. The remaining 52 cars have been delivered this month, and I believe we have one train set of 10 cars that remains to be accepted.
Any questions on the operating report before we move on to the capital report? Go ahead.
Thank you. In comparisons to last month, we are actually adding these months to enhance our presentation. So in the book, in fact, you have a couple of pages, one relating to budgetary and funding status, and the other one is to the safety performance for each individual project. I would like to just first walk you through the project, and then on Second Avenue I have something more specific to discuss. Fulton Street Transit, we received in effect the bids for the last piece of the puzzle, the Transit Center building, and the bids were favorable. We had about $20 million below our estimates. There were 8 bidders, so actually we are extremely happy with the results. It's $175 million, and we expect to move forward and go to the awards later this summer. The Transit Center foundation work is progressing with decking on the mezzanine platform level, 75% complete, and the underpinning of the Corbin building fully completed. So we are actually on schedule there. The NTACC reached an agreement with the Port Authority that was actually voted by the Port Authority Board, and we have secured the $10.5 million to move forward with the the rehabilitation of the southbound RW. That is, we expect to complete that on 9/11/2011. So that's moving along. And then the excavation of the AC mezzanine is actually 85% completed, and the structural steel and concrete mats is 75% complete. So the Fulton Street Transit is moving rather well.
Fortunately, that'll just be R, not RW.
Yes. Well, it's like anything in life is temporary. It could be back as RW in the future. So for the moment, I think it's still RW. It will be just R. The number 7 line extension, we have actually received bids for the facility building excavation core and shell construction at Site L along 41st Street. And again, we have received a lot of bids, and in fact, the low bidder is significantly below our estimate, and it's about we expect to move forward. This is China Halmar joint venture, and it's about $56 million. We expect to award 2 more contracts at sites J and K later this summer, July and August, and we'll see how we are faring out there. And both TBMs are at or near the completion of their runs at the northern end of the new alignment.
What was our expectation for the vent building?
I think we are estimating around 70-some. We are about $20 million below budget. It was very competitive, extremely competitive. Either 8 or 9 bidders, so I don't remember exactly. Ronnie, do you remember how many? 8 bidders.
Is 7 line on?
Excuse me? At this point, we will not make a predicament. I'm not going to forecast at this point. I would like to see the site J and K results, at which point we are going to be engaging into a risk analysis that includes cost and schedule that I promise that you guys will have the end of the summer, beginning of fall. So
it's very good news that this contract is almost $20 million under. That certainly helps.
Every little thing helps, and so again, as I said, the time and budget for the number 7, I would like to reserve judgment until we are closer to seeing exactly what happens to the 2 other sites, at which point we are going to do a complete analysis and we'll present it to the board. And as I said, it's going to be end of the summer, beginning of fall. I would at this point rather not be a forecaster.
We'll hold you to that, Michael.
I'm sure. I have no doubts about that. No, weather is not, and project completions are not always the easiest thing to do. I would like to move on to the 2nd Avenue, and here I just want to walk you through some of the steps. Can you turn it on? Okay. As some of you have participated at the at the ribbon cutting of moving forward at the TBM, and this is actually the 200-ton. This is the TBM cutter head that has been delivered to the site. It's 200 tons, and it obviously was done at night, so we will disrupt, so we won't disrupt traffic as much. And it was lowered into the cavern, Bogdan. What you're looking at are the 2 starting tunnels, and the TBM being assembled actually was lowered onto the eastern tunnel and then moved laterally to the western tunnel. Actually, I brought a short, about a minute video. You see the starting for whoever was not there.
Today, starting up the tunnel boring machine, which you see behind me, for the 2nd Avenue subway. This is a tremendously exciting day for the project. It moves the project forward a whole nother step. And when this project is completed in December of 2016, it will have immediate benefits for New York. It moves 200,000 people a day, and it immediately relieves the crowding on the Lexington Avenue line, which has been with us for decades. Everyone will appreciate this project when it's completed.
The importance of this day is that we're actually now poised to go through and create the tunnels under Manhattan, under the 2nd Avenue, that will carry us to where we need to be. This machine is about 2.5 blocks long. Is going to move at a pace of somewhere between 40 to 60 feet a day to create the 2 tunnels that eventually will be the beginning of the 2nd Avenue subway.
And I'm thrilled to be here. It shows the 2nd Avenue subway is going to be built, and it's going to be built on time. And this subway not only will build and help build the economic future of our great city, it is employing roughly 16,000 people and has a commitment of over $1.4 billion in federal funding.
Actually, very few people would know that I have named the TBM machine after my granddaughter. Her name is Adi, and she's 2.5 years old. And I did it because I thought that this is the true future. And she probably will get to ride the trains much more than I will.
It's an investment in our great city. It's an investment in our people. And we are going to stay on this project, make sure that it's built and will be there to serve New Yorkers.
From this one, what?
Without the bow tie, we didn't recognize you. No way.
It was actually an exciting thing to see. Right.
Carolyn Maloney said that it was going to be done on time, and she got all the money for it, so you have to...
Well, we are on time, and I'm going to just also walk you through some of the issues that we have encountered as of late, and there are geotechnical issues. As we are looking at the subsurface issues along 2nd Avenue, we have discovered that we do have on the eastern tube, the one that is on the east side of 2nd Avenue, some geotechnical problems around actually 90th Street as well as 78th Street. This is just a depiction of the profile. And the area that you're seeing there on the A is an area of about 145 feet long in which we uncovered that. And B is an area just to the left and right of 78th Street where the quality of rock and the depth is not exactly what was expected following the investigation, the geotechnical investigation that we have had from our consultants. And the quality of the rock seemed to be relatively poor. We have envisioned that we will be able to jet grout, and actually that's not going to be the case. We need to freeze the ground there. So we actually need to put a freezing plant and drop down tubes all the way about 75 feet in order to freeze it in that area. When that happened, immediately we realized that we had to flip we're now starting to actually do the tunneling boring on the west tunnel, and in fact because of that we decided to go all the way to 65th Street. Originally we were supposed to stop at 75th, pull back. Now we have the time because while this is being the ground is being frozen, we're going to be able to go all the way to 6050. We'll be there sometime around the end of October, and then we'll pull it back, and we expect to start the eastbound around January of 2011. This is, everything has good parts and not so good parts. The good part is that we're going to save money because we are going to do a tunnel using the TBM rather than shoot and blast on the western tunnel, but we have to pay more for freezing the ground. So it's kind of a balancing act. It's going to be about probably at the end of the day a wash. But we had to totally alter our schedule, and we're still looking as to what opportunities we can avail ourselves when we do that in order to stay on schedule. That is extremely important for us.
Do we cheer for solid rock or loose rock? What's more better?
Solid rock, if we can help. Yeah, it is much better. So we can go through. So these are actually the geotechnical issues that we have encountered. I just wanted to make sure that you are aware of it and that you understand what we're doing. So this is the area that's going to be frozen. It's going to be all the way down, by the way. It's not just what it's shown. It's going to be all the way. The green should have gone all the way down to the red line. And that's just show area B. The area B, we do not know at this point what the situation is. We are still investigating it. We are taking additional borings to understand exactly what is happening, and we will be, once this is done, we will know more as to what we need to do there.
What is freezing? How does that help?
Well, it creates, just think of it as you have water in the ground, and what you do is you are freezing everything, and it turns into a solid, into solid rock. So what you do is when you go in now, it will basically behave similar to a hard rock. So you go through. So that's really that. And the problems here are a little more complex because it's not that you have a soft ground. In this case, we have rock, but the rock is fragmented. And it's not exactly, we couldn't grout it. There was some permeability issues, so it's a little more. Here we don't know yet, but I'm just alerting you to the fact that there is a possibility there will be some issues there.
How do you freeze 10 or 12 stories down? How do you do that?
You put tubes about 7 feet in center. We have, in effect, two. They will be filled with a brine, a combination of water and salt. That will give you actually the freezing mark. I think is about 15 degrees. We have two plants, refrigeration plants above. One is a backup to the other, and they start freezing the ground, and then they transmit. Basically, they're using I think ammonia to do that, and they're creating the low temperature. Everything freezes around the pipes. And then when you go in, we actually, in effect, cut the pipes as well as you go in. And the trick here is to maintain, actually, when you go into the thawing cycle, you want to do it in such a way so you're not creating ground movement. So that's another little trick that has to make sure that technically we're doing it in such a way so it will not affect the foundation of the buildings along the alignment.
I'm not going to ask you what it does to rats, don't worry.
It's too deep down for the rats. The rats like it a little further up.
No food source.
That's right. There's no food source.
We had to freeze soil for the number 7
The number 7
extension
had
as well.
it, and in fact, we are actually the tail track on number 7, a stretch of about 40 feet. We're doing it again for the same exact reason. It is, from a risk point of view, it is actually the less riskier approach in doing it. We could have done it in a different way, but that's we minimize the risk to everyone doing that. So,
Michael, was this came as a surprise that we were encountering these soil conditions, and what sort of, when this project was conceived, it's my understanding that it relied on borings from the 1970s. which, and you wouldn't imagine the geography of New York to have changed that much since the 70s, but were there a sufficient number of borings for us to understand what geological conditions we were going to be facing when we did this project?
Let me put it this way. What we did is not that we just used the borings that existed, but there was a sampling methodology applied to verify that these borings are actually accurate. And in this particular case, we had drilled next to the 1970s borings, and we found that to be pretty much the same. What we did not do, we did not actually do anything in between. We have predicted, our engineers predicted that the quality of the rock may not be as good, and because of that, we have envisioned to grout the area. Yet, when we got there and we started to look at you start doing permeability tests to see if you can actually, the grout will take. The geotechnical engineers employed by the contractor, that was Muser Rutledge. It's a pretty reputable firm, if not one of the most reputable geotechnical firms in the city. They believe that there are areas that will not be, they will not take the grout. In plain and simple words, since this is the water table is very high. The fear was that if you will not take the grout and you're not going to be able to get solid ground, you may have a breach and you may have water gushing in and so forth. So that was not predicted to happen. Could have been, it's hard to tell.
Are you saying we're not going to have South Ferry type water problems in any of these tunnels? Are we?
No. This is a totally different thing. It's just
and geologically, does the bedrock shelf fall off from the west side to the east side? Is that what's happening?
Yes.
So the west is all clear, and we can
just... The west is all clear. It just falls off precipitously. The slope is kind of a very sharp.
And how
slope.
do we know that south of 78th Street we're not going to encounter more of these types of conditions? Has it been mapped out pretty well?
Apparently, yes, is mapped out, well, and people have confidence that will not be no problems there.
And when will we have some idea of what the cost implications are for all of this? For freezing versus...
We are actually on the freezing. We are now negotiating with the contractor on a price to do the work. And as far as 78th Street, we don't know what type of problems we expect to have, so therefore I cannot say one way or another if we have a problem. Okay, so until we get the remainder of the borings done, I will not be able to determine if we have a problem or not.
And from a financial standpoint, of course, none of this is great news.
Well, yes, if you want to look, yes. Clearly it costs more, but at the same time, what happened here is that we're getting probably a break because we are now going to take the western tunnel with a TBM machine that is significantly cheaper than do drill and blast. There was envisioned to do drill and blast. Now we're taking so we're going to make money there while we're probably going to pay here. So I don't believe there is a financial impact on that.
And is there any report, anything further to say on the buildings, on the shoring up of any of the buildings, or the identification of additional potential problem areas?
At this point, you know of the buildings that are north of 92nd Street that didn't change. The only thing that I can report there is that the work is moving forward and we're doing what we need to do. Regarding the buildings that are south of that is a total of 100, and my recollection was 196 total between 86, 72nd, and 63rd. We have done 81 buildings. They are now with the Department of Buildings. They're looking at that. They have to get back to us with their assessment of our reports, and that will, after that, we'll make a decision which buildings, if any, we need to do any work in advance of us getting there.
And what's the time frame for knowing that?
That's I'm actually next time that we meet, I'm going to report a time frame for all of the buildings, including the 86th and 63rd. I would at this point, I don't have something that I can hand you.
So that next month we may see.
You will have a full report on that.
Keep your fingers crossed, folks. That's a lot of buildings.
If the tunnel boring conditions are better to the west and the buildings are falling apart on the 2nd Avenue, should we be having a 3rd Avenue subway?
Why not? I know. That's it.
Procurements? The procurement package this month represents both NYCT Transit and MTA Capital Company procurements. It includes 10 actions totaling $15.2 million in expenditures. Steve Plachaki and Ronnie Hickam are here to answer any questions, but I ask for your approval of all 10 actions in the agenda.
I have a motion, and then we'll take questions. Questions?
I actually have a question on what's not in here. This morning at the Railroad Committee, we approved that contract that they said was primarily New York City Transit, which was the Wright Express off-site gas cards. Is that something that doesn't go through the committee, that will go through finance?
Steve?
That was a joint procurement that was led by Metro North, so they had the information in their package.
Right. They had mentioned that it was predominantly used, I think, by transit.
It's predominantly in terms of that procurement. A portion of it is for fuel cards,
right.
And
I think all of it was.
It is. It was actually solicited in 3 parts. I think what they presented today was for the fuel card portion of it, and effectively that's for off-site fueling, and it's used by paratransit carriers as well as for our non-revenue fleet.
Somebody explain in simple words why it costs me.
I can explain that to you. Every one of our major projects, we have a scheduler that is actually the schedule. In this case, a senior scheduler. It does nothing else but making sure, looking at the schedule of the contracts and how they progress and measuring against where we're supposed to be and making adjustments. Until now, we did have a scheduler there. And these people are actually not employees of MTACC. Some of them are, some are not. In this particular case, this gentleman was not. He was employed by one of our consultants, and the gentleman left. We replaced the gentleman with another individual. That in this time we decided to, and it was competitive, and this is an individual that makes, I think, was making 10% less than the prior guy on the job, and overall we are saving almost 20% on the overall cost, because the cost that you see there includes overhead and whatever profit, and this is a sub-consultant to PB Bovis joint venture. The name of the company is AG Consulting Engineers, is a DBE, and we're getting actually a good deal for a period of, the contract will take us to the completion in June 2014, so that's a maximum amount that we'll pay, but it could be less depending on our timing of completion of the project. So this represents salary, overhead, and an 8% profit that the company gets. So this is very reasonable, and this is, again, almost 20% less than the prior contract we had.
It's actually 28% less.
28% less?
And the prime is not taking a markup on the sub. It's a straight pass-through.
Excuse me? One employee, that's it, one person. Well, if you figure out that it's a 4-year contract, then you take 960,000 divided by 4, you get around 240, something like that. And now you take that and you take out the profit and overhead. The gentleman's salary comes to be $105,000 a year, approximately.
Any other questions? Can I have a vote to move this package to the board? Any opposed? Okay, package moves.
Service changes?
Yes, go ahead.
In Section 7 of the agenda, we are presenting 2 service change proposals for committee information. Both are the implementation of limited stop bus service on routes in Brooklyn and Queens. The first proposal is to implement 7-day-a-week limited stop service on the Q58 bus route. This action will enhance service attractiveness to the majority of the Q58 customers by offering reduced travel time on the route. And the second proposal is to implement AM and PM peak weekday limited stop service on the B82 bus route, and the intent is to address traffic congestion which results in slow service along the route and to reduce the travel time for those customers as well. Both actions are cost neutral and are responsive to the needs of those respective communities, and they're offered for information only.
You may have remember seeing these in the bus committee earlier. Any questions on these service changes? Okay, special presentations.
Yes, we have the regular status report on MetroCard, but we really want to focus two presentations for you. The first has to do with earlier in the year we had a discussion about the performance measures that we use at the committee, and one was the ongoing dialogue about the useful or lack of usefulness of the absolute on-time performance number. And what we'd like to show you is a presentation of some recommended changes that we will bring forward. Please note that we're not bringing them forward for action at this board meeting. If you'll recall, I committed that we would meet with the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee and the strap hangers to solicit their support in moving forward with the changes to these, and that meeting has been held, but we want to give them time to provide comments back to us, so we wouldn't expect action at this monthly cycle. Would be probably the next monthly cycle or thereafter, but we'll go through the presentation now. Peter?
Thank you. If you go to the next, okay. We actually end with our recommendations, so if you go to the next slide, Judy. Actually, we had a good discussion at the beginning of this meeting that started to point out some of the flaws that we've seen of the current indicators, which are both intended to be a management tool for transit to actually see where it needs to address and improve service, as well as a way for the public and the board to know how we're doing. We also wanted to look to the extent we could at standardizing our reporting frequency. We have some indicators, such as the passenger environment survey, that we only present every 6 months. Other things we present monthly. We clearly, in this constrained budget environment, needed to look at ways to either reduce the cost of preparing this information or get it out for equal cost, and to try to look at understanding, communicating. And another factor, we know we've had a lot of changes in the last couple of years in performance indicators, and I know that there's been a desire to look at least some things that we can do historical comparisons, even if we're changing things. No single indicator can do all that. Next. As background, we present for reliability, we now have 3 different indicators we present every month. Absolute on-time performance, which is produced by Department of Subways, and basically looks at all trips, compares to the base schedule that's in the pick that the crews pick twice a year. Controllable on-time performance is designed to take into account planned work and maintenance and to exclude things like police actions and customer actions that might not be directly controllable by operations in the field. But as was pointed out before, an absolute on-time performance and the rules that evolved in the last few years, even though we're doing a lot of system work that we plan for, that we tell all our customers about, in some cases, for example, stations are closed for reconstruction, that's resulting in all trains being considered late, bypassing those stations, and it really has become a number that doesn't mean very much, as was pointed out before on the 6 and the Q and the B, and the A route, as a matter of fact, as well. And finally, we produced weight assessment, which is a number we've produced for about 10 years, that's designed to show the intervals between trains, which is something that we feel is probably the most valuable piece of information to most of our customers who are in fact not traveling from end to end on a route, but really want to know if a train's scheduled to be there every 5 minutes, are there 5 minutes between trains? And there's some issues still with how we produce that, but we'll go into. The last point is that weekday versus weekend, most of these information was these numbers were produced for weekday. We recently, in the last year or two, began producing them for weekend information, but there's a lot of questions as to when on the weekend we run a service that's dramatically different than what is shown in the subway map due to reconstruction. How meaningful is that number? For example, if a train is operating a very short segment for some weekend or do a different terminal the other weekend, how do you compare the on-time performance? Another example is the C train in your agenda this month shows 0% on-time performance on weekends because it didn't operate any of the weekends in that month. Next. The absolute and controllable on-time performance currently both define late as if a train arrives at the terminal later than 5 minutes from its scheduled time. And again, those are measured 24-hour daily, but also we split out AM and PM peak. Weight assessment currently is defined as the gap between two trains, the interval between two trains should be whatever it's scheduled, plus or minus 2 minutes or within 2 minutes more in the peak or 4 minutes in the off-peak. And it currently doesn't matter how frequently the route is scheduled to operate. We give that 2-minute cushion in the peak and 4 minutes in the off-peak. Now I'm going to introduce Larry Gould, Senior Director of Operations Analysis, to my left, who will talk further about the on-time performance and what we're proposing.
Okay, going to page 5. Probably the most profound thing wrong with performance indicators, the way we report them now, is they so poorly reflect the customer's actual experience, going to the station, waiting for the train, and getting on the train. Really, all they measure is what time the train gets to the end of the line compared to when it was supposed to. As Peter mentioned, very few customers ride to the end of the line, with certain exceptions on certain lines, but for the most part, the end of the line is the lightest part of the route. It's also true that even the customers who ride to the end of the line have their boarding experience somewhere other than the end of the line. The second problem, also Peter referenced it, is that the figure of absolute OTP tends to swing all over the place. And one of the interesting things from the early part of this meeting is when a line suddenly drops to near zero because we're skipping a station that we plan to skip for construction, not only does that line go to zero, but it affects the system-wide number. And the system-wide number can change by several percent simply as a result of skipping one station in a planned way. We also have a problem with on-time performance that the way it's measured when dispatchers and management take actions to try to repair a problem with service, that those actions can also result in hurting the performance statistic. On the other hand, one of the original thoughts behind this controllable and absolute concept was the external incidents, such as the things caused by the police or caused by a customer acting in an illegal way. And the need to differentiate for those is actually not really there because they don't comprise a substantial proportion of the delays that customers experience. They're actually statistically a small proportion. So going on to page 6, the way we've been reporting on-time performance has resulted in motivations to do things that are probably not in the best interest of service. For example, there's a tendency to add scheduled recovery time before the terminal. In other words, add minutes. You could call it a form of padding. This is not a motivation that improves customer service. It simply improves statistics. There is a motivation right now to allow trains to run early. Now, if you're already on board a train, you might not have a problem if that train gets to its destination early. But if you're trying to board a train at a station, you know exactly why a train should not run early, and that is you'll miss it. And the train that runs early will end up being very lightly loaded, and the customers who would have boarded that train will end up on the train behind it, which will be an overcrowded train. There's also a motivation sometimes to reduce the amount of scheduled service in order to make trains reach the terminal with fewer obstacles in their way. In other words, the train in front is further ahead. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't work, but a statistic that encourages the reduction of service is not necessarily a good statistic. Peter mentioned, and I actually just mentioned also this extreme thing that we're skipping a station and other long-term schedule changes. Every time we decide for a construction project to make a service change, an affirmative decision to expedite construction, we end up penalizing our performance indicators to the point of meaninglessness. And finally, the current absolute and controllable statistics for on-time performance are costing us a lot in terms of the labor of supervisory employees who have to put these statistics together. On the B division in particular, the lettered lines, that's done totally manually. So going to page 7, some of the highlights of the types of changes that we're going to propose. Firstly, is to report one terminal OTP figure, and we're calling this the fixed figure because, again, we're trying to fix what's wrong. We're planning to measure ourselves against the service pattern and the schedule that we're planning to run. So if we're planning to run something different than what's on the subway map, we will measure ourselves against something other than what's on the subway map. We plan to reflect all delays, meaning that police and customer-caused delays would be charged against us. And we certainly plan to stop penalizing ourselves when we choose to close a platform for construction. We hope to emphasize the weekday service, and that's, again, because the weekend service is so radically different that virtually every line in the system has service changes on the weekend. It's rerouted, or the line is split into two, or the line is express when it's normally local when it's normally express, and at a certain point, to say that a given train, to say that the E train, when it's on 6th Avenue, is, and to combine its performance with a weekday when the E train is on its normal route on 8th Avenue, is not especially meaningful. We plan to, wherever possible, automate the data collection through measures such as any time that we can possibly capture a route in a computer, we will do that, and thus not have people reading and copying from pieces of paper written in pencil. And then comes the issue of historic continuity. And while historic continuity is an important consideration, we feel we can reflect it better in the next indicator, which is weight assessment. And right now, if we were to choose to redo the historic record in a fixed way, in other words, according to the new fixed terminal OTP, it would be a very expensive proposition. Now, going to page 8, what we're really hoping for in this entire exercise is to shine a light on an indicator other than OTP, and that indicator is weight assessment. And weight assessment measures exclusively what the customer experience is when they go to the platform and wait for the train. Now, we've been reporting weight assessment, although sometimes at longer intervals than our other performance indicators, for many years now. The weight assessment that we have been reporting is relatively liberal in terms of the criteria in which we judge service. Right now, we pass a train. In other words, a given train, we measure how many minutes it is since the last train has elapsed through the station. And we allow a variance of 2 minutes in the rush hour and 4 minutes in the non-rush hour. As waiting time, that may not sound too extreme, but the effect on loading of a 2-minute variation in rush hour is quite profound. The way we report it right now also has the problem that it tends to penalize our infrequent lines. In other words, lines that run on short headways. Short headways tend to pass a lot more easily. So to look at the threshold chart on page 8 here, if you look at the number 1 train during rush hour, for example, our schedule calls for a 3-minute interval during the rush hour on the number 1 train, and the way we measure it right now with 2 minutes of slack, we actually will pass as opposed to fail a train that is 5 minutes up to 5 minutes behind its leader. Again, for minutes-wise, that may sound reasonable, but a train on the number 1 that is 5 minutes behind its leader is so crowded that you can't get on it when it gets to its heaviest load point. So instead, our proposal is more stringent and will be 3 minutes and 45 seconds. Similarly, for the off-peak, the number one proposal is still 25% of an interval. In other words, 25% variance on a 5-minute interval is 6 minutes 15 seconds, which is more stringent. And even on an infrequent line like the C, there is a slight difference that is, well, it's rather slight in the peak. In fact, in the C, we're actually tightening it a little bit, where a 25% interval on the C train is 12 minutes and 30 seconds. We used to, with the 2-minute variation, allow 12 minutes. Again, that helps address this bias problem. And you can see here what we did in the off-peak for the C. And so basically, if you go to page 9, what will happen when we start reporting weight assessment this way is that most of the lines will go down, and the lines that are more frequent will you can see, for example, the A division tending to go down about 10%. The system as a whole, the number that we report at the beginning, will go down from the upper 80s to the upper 70s. We're putting ourselves in a situation here where we are motivated to improve the evenness of service in order to improve the statistic. And that, in turn, will lead to a better customer experience. Customers will both have the right waiting time and the right load when the train comes. Let me, at this point, put it back to Peter.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to make sure people understand the significance of that, because it's the issue of, if you're on a 2-minute headway and, you just miss a train, and if you go 3 minutes, you have more than a full train load that is going to try to board that next train. So you have a much more difficult time boarding and alighting that train, and you have a more crowded train on board the train. So
much more delays because of dwell time.
Exactly. It exacerbates itself. So we believe this is a move in the right direction, because it's focusing the attention of those resources at a supervisory level that would take action to respond to that in a reactive way to try to get that evenness. Because if we went back to the example I gave at one of the earlier meetings, is if every train is exactly late one interval, the customer experience is really nothing, but every train is, you're 100%, you have 0% on-time performance. So we're exactly, it doesn't know at all, unless he or she knew the train operator. That's the only way. Jeff,
how do you calculate this? This is an average weight assessment at each station per line. How does that work?
What we do on this is, with the on-time performance, every train that comes at the end of the line is recorded. Weight assessment is and always has been, a random sampling that we do in time points in the middle of the line. So we're not at the terminal point. We're at various points along the line. We collect enough data for significance for a 6-month period. So what we're doing to report this monthly now by line is we roll up a 12-month rolling average so we report really the rolling average for the 12-month period ending in the month of reporting.
Will it be exact, though, with ATS on the A division?
With ATS on the A division, the hope is as soon as we can, we'll move towards 100% sampling on the A division. Obviously, on the B division, it's going to be, we'll then take the resources we now use on the A to beef up the B a little bit, but it'll still be a sample.
How big is the sample now?
We'll get that information for you. As I said, it's over a 6-month period we get the line significance. Similarly, with the other PES data, if you go to the next slide, we also do a sampling right now, and we report every 6 months about 30 different indicators on the rail side and a similar number on the bus. These range from litter conditions in the stations, on the platforms, on the track, on the cars, cleanliness, various other issues. And we felt it would be perhaps more useful. We'll still continue to report that in that level of detail every 6 months, but to share with the committee what we've been sharing internally with the operating departments on a monthly basis, what's happening, and to take an example of what other systems around the world, particularly in East Asia, do to roll up a large number of indicators into a smaller group that's more easy to digest. So the proposal is to present every month 3 indicators each for stations and cars, one on appearance, which would roll up the passenger environment scores for litter, cleanliness, and graffiti on stations, and the same on car fleet, but adding the window condition. For equipment, we have a number of measures within the stations, some of which we're going to look to add as we roll out some of the new equipment, and likewise with information, which would be maps, and now adding the countdown clocks, which we right now don't have an indicator for, but we will roll one out. The presentation shows our first shot at how we would weight those. Obviously, that's a somewhat subjective decision, and that's one of the things we're looking for feedback from the PCAC and strap hangers, and also the board as we move forward. And we're going to look at what other market research we might have to aid that. It was also suggested we look at an indicator that rolls up the on-time performance measures as well. So we'll see what we can do with that. The next slide shows just, for a hypothetical line, how we would show that to the board every month. But again, we can work on the format. So, in conclusion, that's what we want to move forward with. But I think, as the president indicated, we'll come back next month and review what we plan to do, and probably begin rolling this out over the summer.
The intention would be we want to solicit the comments of both the strap hangers and the PCAC. Get those comments. If we agree on some revisions, we would bring those back, but do it in concert with their input.
Yes, Andrew.
Just a couple of questions. Excuse me.
I think we get the lights back up, please.
I guess this is either for Peter or for Larry. I don't think transit should be penalized for a train that's not running either. So why, in the case of the C, which frequently doesn't run on weekends, wouldn't it just say not running rather than give it any kind of grade? And the other question would be, I may disagree with you on the issue of if the E is diverted to 6th Avenue, the regularity of that service is still of importance to the rider, and we should know that.
I think you're right about the E. I was using that as a critique of the on-time performance the way we do it now.
It feels like weekends are getting short shrift here, and I understand that everything is such a jumble that you really need a Venn diagram to figure out what's going on the transit system on weekends. But I feel that if there is a service change or a diversion, why aren't we measuring performance according to that schedule change or diversion?
I think that's our intent, and we first wanted to figure out something that worked on weekdays and then figure out how to present it on weekends. We're certainly measuring it on weekends. Now, the weight assessment right now we don't measure on weekends, and it would be a budget issue to start to do that.
But the other issue that we want to deal with, and we do have an outstanding commitment to meet with the PCAC and the strap hangers, that how much service should we plan and schedule to run on weekends when we have a lot of work going on? There's two schools of thought. One is to try to run as much as you possibly can and try to make the intervals as frequent as possible. The other is realistically that when you try to do that and you try to fit too much grain, 10 pounds of grain in a 5-pound bag, you generally don't get the grain flowing the way you want it to. So we want to have an enlightened discussion as to, but at the other end of the spectrum, we don't want to run so few trains that we just make score. So that we believe the discussion really needs to come along the lines of what is the appropriate level of service for all the work that's going on, and then measure us according to that scheduled service when it's formally scheduled. What we don't want to happen, I want to make sure when something's clear, is we don't want a dispatcher or we don't want somebody working in a tower somewhere to make up his or her own schedule on the back of an envelope and then score against that. This would be a published schedule as published by operations planning, not something somebody does on the back of an envelope.
Actually, one other issue, and I think Margaret and a few of us have discussed it, and that is part of the problem with weekend service is that it's so confusing for the majority of people, and we've worked out what we hope will be a better method of getting what's running and what isn't running to the public, so they're not holding doors or asking questions of the operator or the conductor, which also delays the service. I think that's a real problem, the confusion on weekends.
Absolutely.
Yes, Mark.
But when you're talking about weekend service, aren't you trading against the cost of getting the work done at the same time?
Absolutely, and what we want to do is we want to make sure we get the work done, but we also want to have the appropriate level of service out there that is dependable and deals with the evenness issue. Because if we try to put too much service out and the headway varies by as much as 50%, we're inconveniencing people. We really like the headway to be as frequent as possible, but as even as possible.
Yeah, I just think that you need to keep the fact that you're trading against what the whole enterprise costs and how fast you can actually get it back into normal service sort of up front in people's consciousness. It's not just that you're doing this to harass the public.
Well, there's another story, which is that you've heard the chairman, I think he talked at a public meeting a couple weeks back, is from a standpoint of trying to live within the constraints of a constrained capital budget, doing more work and looking at issues of partial line closures, which has historically not been met well, even in a discussion forum in the past. But we may need to do that in order to get this work done.
Just real quickly, I know you talked about talking more with the board and the strap hangers. I thought I saw about a month ago the state control and the city controller looking at these indicators as well. I don't know if it was the indicators or just the impact on delays. That might have been two separate things, but I don't want us to go ahead with something and then they come up with something completely different. I don't know if that's what they're looking at.
I believe the strap hangers looked at the issue of weekend performance, and that's what drove our commitment to meet with them. But I don't know if the controller did as well. Okay. Well, they're looking at how much work is being done. They've initiated a study to look at how much work is being done and the level of service. Yes.
Just one final caveat. We can't kid ourselves. The budget situation is forcing cuts in the operating budget that are going to impact service. They're going to impact the cleanliness cars, cleanliness platforms, and the service that we're delivering to the public. I want to make sure that any changes that we're doing do not make it impossible for us to track our performance from the old to the new and mask the impact of these budget cuts, or make it difficult for us to make the nuanced changes that we might need to make to what we're doing so that the impacts are not as severe as we hope they won't.
No, we have to have enough historical data so that we can make those decisions and pull back if we've gone too far.
And I would think that one of the benefits of countdown clocks is that once everything's in place, we'll automatically have weight assessment times even on weekends to look at for the A division.
Along the lines of what you just said, Tom, I'm sort of skeptical that all this stuff is really worth the trouble. The old statistics, which I'll call them, at least had a trend that we could compare back to the 60s if we had to, so that if the trend was down, we knew that you were in trouble, because it was at least consistent over a long period of time. I'm all in favor of changing the rules if the frequency performance rating shows a remarkable decline. But if you change the statistics every year, you don't have anything to compare them with for the year before, which may be good. But the main value of the old statistics is at least we could analyze the trend generally and see how you were doing. I think that you're sort of eliminating that possibility by trying to make accurate statistics more better in an area where it's almost impossible to do that.
Well, the one thing we're actually going back to is terminal on-time performance. Whenever, whoever, however the decision got made to go to absolute on-time performance, I think that was the aberration that probably shouldn't have been taken. But that's 2010 hindsight. But we're actually going back to terminal on-time performance as it's been measured for years. I'm looking at Larry right now to make sure that that's the case. What we're proposing to do actually goes back to, because years and years ago all we measured was on-time performance and mean distance between failure.
Right. It pretty much goes back to what we did. Now, unfortunately, we can't historically recreate the last couple of years with that measure without a lot of work going back in paperwork. The passenger environment statistics and the weight assessment we can very easily. It's all raw data that we can process whatever, and we will change the past 2 years that we present to the board to match the new measures. So you'll have that historical continuity.
Obviously, there are compromises in anything you're going to do, but I think that, as I understand it, a big thrust in terms of your changes in what you're looking at is to try to provide a sort of service measure that'll give you the incentive to actually improve the service that people care about. And I think that, I mean, obviously the historical comparability is interesting, but at the end of the day, the service that people are getting right now and trying to improve that going forward, I think, is probably what the public cares most about.
You're absolutely right. It's the behavioral issue. We're trying to have performance statistics that induce the right type of behavior on the part of the employees to run the system, especially when delays occur.
Well, this isn't a great example because it's not changing, but we're now stretching out the maintenance cycle on subways by 6 months, I believe. And we're going to look very carefully at mean distance between failures to make sure that that 6 months isn't too long an interval. So these really do have historical meaning and importance.
The second report, quickly.
Could we go? I think most of the people, with the exception of Susan and Jim, did you hear it? Okay. Maybe we could race through this one since it was presented in full at the bus committee.
It wasn't actually. That was just a bus-only presentation. So
okay.
We have
all right. Could we focus on the subway portion then, please?
Margaret is coming up. Margaret Coffey, who's what's your title? Vice President? AVP, Assistant Vice President of Corporate Communications at Transit. If we get the presentation up, I think the beginning part really focuses on the subway. But as I said at the bus committee, bus information is in the subway system. Subway information is at on the bus level. So it is really one system, and we're treating it as such. The biggest changes are on the M train, which will be merged with the V. If you go to the next slide. And the W train elimination. And Margaret, if you could talk to some of the posters that we're going to.
This is just the version of the W that I'm going to hold up right now. This obviously specifically outlines the changes in service that are happening on the W. Encourage people to use the NQ and the R. This as well as the V will be posted in every control area in the system. We will also be giving out a brochure that again discusses the subway service changes that are happening on both these subway routes. Those requiring another language other than English will be encouraged to go to the internet for more information. We will also be having, just for your information, also a master poster that discusses in a brief summary the changes to all the bus service. Again, so a customer can just take a quick glance, see if their route is affected, and then go to the website for more information.
I hope we're supplying magnifying glasses for that one.
Yes, it is unfortunately the biggest size we can make at our print shop, but again, we thought it was in the best interest of customers to at least give them something that they can have a quick glance at and then sort of seek out more information.
And to clarify, that'll be in the subway station. So on the buses, we'll have ones by each borough. So it's somewhat larger type on the bus itself. All of this information will be going up in middle of June. It'll also be going up on the web at roughly the same time. And we'll begin in terms of installing the platform maps, which are a time-consuming process. We'll target the new M route is probably the highest priority, as well as on the cars. And roll out to the rest of the system over about a 4 to 6 week period. Station signage is a major project as well that's affecting several hundred signs, 150 stations infected, and about 3,000 signs within the subway system that need to be changed. And finally, on page 6, the new M route will be using a stretch of track that has not been used in revenue service for about 35 years. It's in good shape, but we just made sure that any little things that need to be cleaned up were done prior to June 28th, as well as the new equipment, the new R160s that will be running on the current V route. We need to make sure that the stopping locations and other station operating issues were addressed prior. As was mentioned, if you go to the next one, at the previous meeting, on the bus side, we have to change probably 9,000 bus stops. And the yellow and the peach signs were used to tell people things were changing. So that's we have our work cut out for us, but we're well on our way to getting it done. Thanks.
Questions? Mark?
The longer we're around here, you learn something new every day. I had no idea that with respect to signage, you have to work so closely with the New York City Department of Transportation. So I think our hats off are to you and Margaret for this close cooperation, which, I mean, I always thought that we were a state agency and we told the city what to do, and if they didn't do it, it was too bad. But this degree of cooperation and the extent that you're working together is eye-opening, and you should both be commended for it.
Sometimes it's more like the other way around. Andrew?
Peter, you mentioned in the bus committee that it would take quite a while to do all of these changes, and you did say, I think, a couple of months maybe for the total. What about the programmable automated announcements on the R160 cars? We wouldn't want them announcing something that wasn't in existence before it happened, I don't think.
Correct. I believe that that's basically it gets uploaded and then it automatically has a date mark on it, so it changes. Clearly, by changing the M and the M routing and the M color, things that we couldn't have considered doing in the old days with roll signs without a lot of expense, is something we can do with electronics, but it does add complications, particularly since the R160 cars are still, the system is still under warranty, and actually, as was pointed out before, we're still getting cars delivered. So we're working through the manufacturer to do that and get that done. Our Department of Subways is the lead on that.
On the other hand, and I mentioned this to Tom, I think G Service stopped running beyond Court Square a month and a half ago with the signs all along Queens Boulevard still say G.
Right. The schedule change happens on June 27th. The reality is one of the reasons we proposed that is because track work, it rarely runs, and it turns out it's not scheduled to run again. We are changing the signs along the G because we can do that. The ones on Queens Boulevard need to change with the V to M anyway, so we're going to do that in one shot.
No other questions. We've got some follow-up reports.
They're just the standard follow-up reports if people have any questions on it.
Are all service changes unaffordable? Can we afford to make service changes in general?
They cost a lot of money. There's no doubt about it. This is by far one of the largest we've ever done, isn't it, Peter?
I think it's certainly the largest on the bus side we've tried to do in one weekend. On the rail side, we've done bigger, but it's still a large one. And there's a lot of little details that you have to think through. I don't know that the overall cost is, compared to our cost of everything else, is that significant, but it does cost.
I mean, this weekend we ran a shuttle. How many bus runs were there? There were 700 and some?
Yeah,
it was one of the biggest shuttles I've ever seen, and it's phenomenal.
Any further questions? If not, may I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor? Thank you. See you in June.